Welcome to another episode of Conduct Detrimental. Dan Luss, joined this week by special guest, first time on the podcast, Sam Tannenbaum. What's up, Sam?
Not much, just excited to be here. It's been a long time coming.
Oh,
First invite. I've known Dan for a long time and just excited to be on the podcast.
long time coming means that you've thought you should have got the invite earlier than this, and that's very forward of you. For the listeners that don't know, Sam joined our firm officially post-law school, post-bar last month, Sam, fair?
Last month, yeah, a little over a month.
So we are, as I from time to time mention, I'm at a law firm called Mordhock and Hamroff. We're in Long Island, New York. We've got offices in the city. Sam is in the city. I'm in Long Island. And Sam got the call tonight. So just like you got the invite yesterday to potentially go to the Mets game, where what did I say? You were the third string quarterback?
Yeah, I think I was a third string quarterback. I said I didn't want to be a backup plan and more of a Yankees guy, hoping that they get the win tonight. Not too confident, but Dan got to see a pretty good game yesterday.
I did. So as the story goes, Sam and I took a trip to Jamaica, Queens. We met with St. John's basketball team. We got to see Coach Pitino firsthand.
Yes, got to see Coach Pitino and the whole
So
team. They look pretty good.
they do look pretty good. They look very tall. I think the shortest guy on that team is like 6'5". That's a
Yeah.
very tall team. But before we finish the story, it was so funny. You and I were chatting, and there was like a slight murmur in the room. Like everyone was kind of doing their own thing. And Coach Pitino walked in, and like I didn't know that Coach Pitino walked in. I just heard the murmuring stop, and then I looked, and there was someone addressing the team. Which obviously was Coach Pitino. I had to ask you. I'm like, that's Rick Pitino, right? The
Yeah.
man has aura. The man has aura. Is that fair?
Yeah, everyone got quiet pretty quickly. They, listened to him, and he got in and out of there pretty quickly.
And he's like, yeah, you guys listen to this. I'm not listening to the lawyers and the financial people, but it was good. But anyway, we got last minute tickets to the Mets game. There was four of us, or we had four tickets. My wife and I were gonna go. We had two extra tickets. So Sam, I told you, you're the backup to the backup. I just need you to be ready just in case these other plans fall through. And to your point, you said I'm ready to go. I'm happy to go on short notice. And Sam, whether you knew it or not, today you were the backup to the backup, and you got the call. So let's see if you're ready to go.
Great.
Okay. Producer Mike Kravchenko is listening in. He's watching the Mets game. Get a lot of people watching the Mets game, and I'm like, who do I know that's pretty well up to speed on sports law and is not a Mets fan and will do me a favor on very short notice? And I'm like, Sam Tannenbaum will do that. Fair?
Yeah, I told Dan as long as I get out of here for the Yankees game, I'll be good to go.
I'll teach you the rules of the podcast. Me and you were just talking. We don't have to talk about Dan. I'm here. It's just me and you. No one's
Okay,
listening.
great.
Okay. We have 5 topics today. We're going to talk about Jabrill Peppers, the New England Patriots defensive player that has basically getting the judge, jury, and executioner treatment from the NFL, which does not always happen. We'll figure out why that's the case. And then we're going to talk about Deshaun Watson, who was never placed in the commissioner's exempt list, unlike Jabrill Peppers, so makes sense of that. We're going to talk about 2 topics that came up at our St. John's talk yesterday. That is the NCAA versus House preliminary approval of the class action settlement. We're going to talk about this interesting story that's being dubbed the Rudy Project, where I think $9 billion in capital is being floated around college football to make like a super league. OG listeners of the show will remember our Super League soccer episode. So it's potentially being talked about in college sports. And then we're going to head over to boxing. Devin Haney, we didn't talk about this lawsuit last week. Devin Haney ends up suing Ryan Garcia. It's a lawsuit that seems pretty similar, if people recall, to the Mark Hunt, Brock Lesnar UFC lawsuit a couple years ago, where performance-enhancing drugs were alleged to be involved. There was allegations of assault and battery during a sporting event. And as my current and former law students know, I have a class, I just had it this past week, on assault versus assumption of the risk. And the question at the heart of the Devin Haney case, same thing at the Brock Lesnar case, do you assume the assumption of the risk if your opponent is using some form of steroids or some type of performance-enhancing drugs? So we're going to talk about those 5 cases. A reminder before we get started, our podcast is sponsored by Themis Bar Review. Sam, make sure you answer this question correctly. Did you use Themis? Yes or no?
Yes.
The answer to that question, Sam, I think was no, but that means you're in the doghouse. You should be using Themis. Themis is the top bar prep company in the galaxy. Sam, as an OG listener of this podcast, I don't know why you didn't use Themis, and shame on you. Themis is the best. Use Themis. Sam, when do the
My
bar
mistake.
results come out?
The bar results are supposed to come out next week, but you never really know. I would say the next week or two. A little
Um,
nervous, but pretty confident.
okay, I'm rooting for you. I'm
Thank you.
rooting for you. I'm rooting for you to pass the bar. Um, I am not necessarily rooting for you in other aspects of life, but everything work related, I'm rooting for you. Do you know what I'm referencing when I say that?
I think I do. We have a office football pool at the
I know
firm.
we have an office pool, Sam. Come on, talk shit to
Yeah,
me.
I'm talking to the viewers. We have an office football pool at the firm where you have to pick every game based on the spread. And we're, what, 5 weeks into the season now? And
We are.
uh, I have won 2 of the weeks. And Dan, how many have you won?
Listen, it's not about how many I've won. There's 60 people in the pool, and if you've won 2 out of 5 weeks, that's very impressive. But Sam, just for the overall records, are we close? Am I winning?
I think we're somewhat close, but
Somewhat close.
at the end of the day,
What does
I've
somewhat close
already
mean?
won.
Does
I
somewhat close mean that we're tied?
I don't think we're tied. I think I'm up 1 or 2 games on you. I'm not entirely sure. I don't have it in front of me,
Oh, okay.
but I think you're a little bit more worried about how I'm doing than I am with you. But
Okay. I'm
to
not
each their
rooting for
own.
you in the pool because you've already won twice. It was a $70 to enter, and you're already up. You've already won 240. You're a game up on me. I will periodically check in if any listeners are curious. My chasing of Sam in the lead it's going to happen. I'm in sixth place out of 60, and Sam, congrats, you're in third place. I will catch you. I will find you, and I will destroy you, Jason Bourne style. Okay. Let's get started. We're gonna do Jabrill Peppers first, and we'll keep this episode pretty tight. Sam, you got a birthday party to go to? We're recording this at like
Yeah, I have
16 at night.
one of my best friend's birthday, which also includes watching the Yankees game. Again, very nervous, not confident that they're going
What
to win
time? What
tonight.
time do the Yankees play?
7:08.
Okay, so
Not
we will.
confident at all. Aaron Judge doesn't know how to hit. So
Um,
let's see what happens.
at some point during this podcast, when there's a lull, you and I are going to bet on Aaron Judge anytime homer tonight. That's I
Okay.
had this thought. He's so cold. I
So,
think we're going to
so
get
you
good
want me to
odds.
lose money now?
I'm saying that you should support the best player on your baseball team if you are a fan of said team. Is what I'm saying.
Yeah. Well, I was there on Saturday night, game one, and although we won, it was not very comforting watching him hit the baseball.
He is
He
one
didn't
game
hit the baseball.
one game away from a turnaround. You got to be glass half full. Okay, let us start our conversation, and we'll try to be fairly quick on this episode. Let's start with Jabrill Peppers. So, for those that don't know, Jabrill Peppers, former Giant, was involved in the I think it was the Odell Beckham trade. I'm pretty confident that was the trade. Yeah, I think it was. Jabrill Peppers was involved in the Odell Beckham trade. Whatever, he's with the Giants, with the Browns. He ends up with the Patriots. Great. The story goes. It's kind of out of nowhere. It's a story from earlier this week. We're recording this again on Wednesday. Story on Monday that Jabrill Peppers was arrested for assaulting his girlfriend. And the story is pretty. At least the allegations out there are a little grim, right? This is a quote from basically a responder. Said that he hit her, he choked her, he took off her clothing, he put her outside. There's allegations of being choked 6 times, allegations of strangulation, and on top of that, was charged with assault and battery with a dangerous weapon, strangulation, and possession of cocaine. So I have a question for you, Sam. Okay, you've been in my sports law. We should mention this, Sam. You were a former student of mine in my Fordham sports law class. True.
Yes, I was.
What is the commissioner's exempt list? It's one of my earliest things I teach you guys.
So the commissioner's exempt list is basically players are placed on the list where they're not allowed to play. There's not really a timetable, and there's kind of unknown for how long the player is going to be out, but it's for pretty serious matters. So it's only happened a few times, but yeah, hope that
That
helps.
answer is showing you why you got an A in my sports law class. So kudos to you. That's correct, and I think you said the important part. It's an indefinite leave list. We don't know when they're going to come back, but you put them on the list. to basically give them their full pay, but they're off the active roster, and another player can come and you can replace them. Let's see if you remember this. Sam, was Deshaun Watson ever placed on the commissioner's exempt list?
I believe that he was not.
He was not.
Which was a pretty weird scenario, given, the whole guaranteed money situation, the trade. Everyone thought that he had a pretty serious situation going on, that he would be placed on it, but he never was.
So at the end of the day, these are all allegations, right? Like everything happened with Jabrill Peppers, allegations. Everything happening with Deshaun Watson, allegations. Like, who are you and I to decide what's worse, right? Like 25 women claiming that you sexually assaulted them, or like your girlfriend claiming that you assaulted her and you threw her outside like without her clothes on. Like, they're both really bad. But the commission's exempt list is intended to exist for allegations. We have to figure out what these allegations are, and then we move on. So yeah, I think it's just as odd as you that Watson is not placed in the exempt list. Yes, he's eventually suspended if they do like a full hearing and they do it in the off season. But yeah, I mean, there were times where he was playing while these cases were working themselves out in court. That was his last year with the Texans. So a little bit odd. I have a recollection, and I could be wrong on this. Alvin Kamara, who also had his own assault charges, mind you, assault charges that were involved in some type of fight, that he wasn't placed on the commission's exempt list. Now, Sam, let me test your football knowledge here. This is a two-part question. Are you ready for this?
Mm-hmm.
Who is the starting running back currently for the Kansas City Chiefs?
Well, I think it's a committee, but if you're referring to the commissioner's exempt list,
who am I talking
got to
about?
be Kareem Hunt.
Okay. I think he was placed on I know he was cut
he was.
from the Chiefs, for what I'm about to tell you. He was on the exempt list. He was cut from the Chiefs once upon a time. Now, Sam, do you know what he did to warrant the commissioner's exempt list and being cut by his team? A former very productive running back, his first stint with the Chiefs.
I'm not entirely sure, but I think it's some sort of assault.
It is, but here's the important part. Okay. We have, with Watson, there was no allegation of like, I'll say a physical harm, like strangulation or punching or kicking or some type of like beating, right? Sexual assault comes in all shapes and sizes, but it's not. Watson wasn't being accused of physically, I don't want to say hurting somebody, but sending someone to the hospital with strangulation or assault with a deadly weapon, anything like that. Jabrill Peppers, that's what he was accused of. Now, Alvin Kamara was accused of assaulting another male in some type of fight. It was caught in an elevator in Vegas during the Pro Bowl. Now, here's the interesting one. Kareem Hunt was basically, and I've seen the video of this, Kareem Hunt kicked somebody, and I'll call it like he pushed somebody with his foot. I don't think it was like a full kick situation, but he assaulted a woman in a hotel like lobby or something like that in a hallway. And what's the common nucleus, right? Like it's physically hurting a female. So, do we want to call it domestic violence, or do we want to call it assault on a member of the opposite sex? That seems to be what the NFL is putting, just from my, we're using somewhat of a small sample size. But after the Ray Rice saga, I think the NFL takes a no tolerance policy with that, maybe with some exceptions. But that's the only way I can explain how Jabrill Peppers gets put on the commissioner's exempt list and Deshaun Watson and Alvin Kamara do not. Jabrill Peppers is a pretty high profile player. I don't think we can explain it just that he's not a skilled player, like it be an offensive player. Jabrill Peppers is a pretty big name, and the fact that he's getting placed on the exempt list while Watson, who we're going to talk about in a minute, is not, I think that explains it, at least for my purposes. Do you agree?
Yeah.
Oh.
I think so. I mean, it seems like it's a pretty, again, like you said, small sample size. From my recollection, the people that have been placed in the commissioner's exempt list have been guys like Mike Vick and Reuben Foster and Greg Hardy, and you never really know what the criteria is to be placed, but I think that that's a good thought process to what puts someone on the exempt list.
Sam, just because you're in our sports law group doesn't mean you have to agree with me on every topic. So if you disagree, feel free. We have 4 other topics to disagree with me on. Are you ready? Okay. Yeah. And I'm watching the clock very closely. Okay. Deshaun Watson, we'll move on to our second topic, was in the news this week. We spent a lot of time a couple episodes ago talking about this new accusation and whether it was previously disclosed to the Browns and Tony Busby, this accuser's lawyer, was basically saying, I have video evidence and I'm going to show it to the league. We're going to meet with the league. And, there was some question about whether his contract could be voided if he didn't disclose this to the Browns, all this fun stuff. We have an update from this week. Deshaun Watson has now settled that case, presumably with some portion of the $230 million he was guaranteed. That case is being settled. I imagine there's going to be some type of NDA, some type of non-disclosure agreement that's going to be signed in order to get that money, and probably pretty similar to the previous cases that were settled. Sam, we'll keep this one pretty tight. Do you think Deshaun Watson, do you think he's going to play the whole year? I find the situation so odd, especially after they signed Jameis Winston. Just something doesn't make sense to me in the Cleveland quarterback room.
Yeah, I think, in addition to his struggles on the field, the Browns have been absolutely terrible this year. I think, they don't really know if he's going to play this year because it seems like every, week or month, something new comes out with these allegations. And, I think there's a lot of unknowns with the whole situation. So I wouldn't be shocked if they, turn to Jameis Winston either because of his play or because of, the off the field situation.
I seem to it doesn't really make sense if a quarterback or a pitcher or anybody that's getting paid a lot of money is not performing well. You could bench them for a period of time. You can put them on the injured. Like if Watson's shoulder is still bothering him, he could sit for a game or two. I think this might be something like in the vicinity of like James Dolan, which we know as New Yorkers and Knicks fans. I think Brown's leadership is just being so stubborn about this contract, and they're hoping that somehow he can play himself into form. But I don't know. And I've made this prediction before. I'll make it again here. I don't think this is the last moment to come forward. I don't think this is the last settlement that Deshaun Watson pays. He's now set a precedent that he will pay very quickly. Right? It took the last woman about over a year to get paid their settlement. And I have no idea. I have no inside information. I'm just saying that there are public reports about 66 women giving him massages, and some had positive things to say, some had negative things to say, and that's a report from the New York Times. I believe Jenny Vrentas had that report. But I almost find it impossible that Watson has settled with all 66 of these women, and now if you see a precedent of Watson paying people off, maybe you come forward, and we should mention, right, this lawsuit is public because they couldn't come to terms on a settlement. I'm sure the lawyer reached out to Watson's attorney ahead of time. So there's God knows how many settlements that we don't know about that have never reached the public eye and have some NDA being signed. Sam, anything else to add on that? Do you feel like I've nailed that or any disagreement?
Yeah, I think you've done a good job. But again,
man, you think so?
I do. But I think that he's trying to keep a lot of this hush hush. And at the end of the day, what is he making? $220 million guaranteed. He has the money to pay off all of these women. So, who knows what he's doing under the rug?
Yes, I was going to say something inappropriate, but I will not. Okay, let's move over. I'm watching the clock for you, but we'll keep this pretty brief. So I mentioned we spoke to St. John's yesterday. Shout out to friend of the show. I think he's listening to this. Ed Cull, who's the former athletic director at Fordham, moved over to St. John's, and our firm had previously worked with St. John's. So when my main Fordham contact moves from Fordham to St. John's, we already have a pretty strong tie into St. John's. It was very good news. So, I went to a small school, Union College, D3 hockey. Shout out 2014 Division I National Hockey Champions.
Not the Dutchman anymore, though, right?
How did you know that? That was very impressive.
You know my dad went to Union. I have to give a shout out.
College. Shout out to your dad that went to Union College. What class was he?
He was class. Oh, you're putting me on the spot here.
I am.
I want to say 79, 80.
Well,
around there.
You know this, but the podcast audience doesn't know this. My parents both went to Union, who were 73 and class of 73 and class of 75. So interesting.
I want to say 79, but I'll follow up with that.
Yes, but go Union. Union's the greatest. So I have no affinity for college sports. I occasionally will be a diehard Nebraska fan, but for college basketball, Nebraska kind of sucks. Sorry. Yeah, college basketball. Nebraska's they were pretty good last year, but generally suck. So we're all in on the Johnnies this year. Sam, fair? All in?
Yeah, I mean, I have a little bit of a different background. I'm a big Maryland Terrapins fan. I
Yeah,
went to
but they're not.
Maryland, so
They're not that good.
I think we're going to be pretty good this year, but have to always root for the Johnnies, obviously.
We don't have to, but now we have to.
No,
Now they're a firm client.
being from Long Island, you got to root for the Johnnies.
Okay, Johnny's it is. Also, fun fact: we went into the Carnesecca Hall of Fame room, and Ron Artest is not on the Hall of Fame wall.
Yeah, Chris Mullins there, no Ron Artest.
Rich Aurelia made the wall, former
Yeah,
San
I don't know
Francisco
if it's
Giant great.
because of the former allegations, his uh his antics, but they
I
didn't
was
put Meta
surprised
World
though.
Peace on the wall.
Yeah, I was surprised, but that was a good observation on your part. You know who made the Carnesecca Hall of Fame?
Carnesecca.
Carnesecca's in it. Yeah, that's a good picture we got. Okay, so let's do this part pretty quick. So we've been on this show over the last couple of months talking about this NCAA versus House class action preliminary approval. Will they? Won't they? Will it get approved? Will it not get approved? Who these objectors are? So we have reached a stage of preliminary approval. Now, what does that mean? Does that mean that, I guess for our new listeners to the show, the NC versus House settlement, House basically sued and said that he tried to broaden NIL rights and suing for back pay and future pay to change the payment structure of college sports. The settlement that was arrived at was a $2.8 billion settlement for back pay, right? That needs to be paid over 20 years. But it was also attempting to create a system of, we'll call it revenue sharing, but it's really a cap that schools can spend. I think it's approximately up to $20 million a year that schools can actually pay athletes directly. So it's a very big case. It's going to open up the door to another stream of revenue, as we told our St. John's basketball players yesterday. But what happened is the judge approved it. So on September 5th, the parties went in front of Claudia Wilkin, and she kind of gave some indication that she wasn't going to approve the settlement. She was going to reject it and make the parties go back to the table. And what she, despite, and Sam, without mentioning the case, is it fair that sometimes judges yell and scream and make a lot of noise, but they want to send a message? Is that fair?
Yeah, I think that's fair.
Yeah, sometimes the judges would, and we're not talking about any case in particular, sometimes judges will make a point to kind of throw you over the coals, and they want to send the right message. So Claudia Wilkin on September 5th basically told the parties they need to get to work. It was pretty critical. And, and again, we know some full disclosure. We know parties, I know a couple people at Winston Strawn. The parties come back. They make kind of minimal changes. The biggest change that's being reported that many people are talking about is this change that that deals over $600 have to be reported only if you're from a booster or a collective. Previously, that was for all deals over $600, which was a little crazy. And now that deal, I guess that rule is now limited to boosters and collectives. So with very limited and minimal changes, Claudia Wilkin preliminary approves this settlement. So my understanding of the time frame, in the next 2 weeks, the plaintiffs' lawyers involved have to reach out to all the potential members of that class. And I think the deadline for opt-in is January 31st. I think that's it. So by that date, we'll know if there's sufficient members that have opted into the settlement. There is language in the settlement that says if enough people opt out, then the settlement will be declared, I don't want to say null and void, because that's much a little bit of a stronger term. But if enough people don't opt in, this settlement doesn't really make sense from a perspective moving forward. So we have a couple roadblocks before then. There's I think a final hearing, Sam. What was it? April
7th, I believe.
April 7th, 2025 is supposed to be the final hearing. So that'll allow people to opt in. It'll figure out the numbers if enough people have opted out. But it also leaves an opportunity for those objectors. So one of the main lawyers involved in the Ed O'Bannon case is now speaking out against the settlement. There are some of which are friends of the show. Garrett Broche is involved in one of those Colorado cases. I think the case is Fontenot. There's a lot of people that don't appear to be happy with the settlement. So just because the settlement is preliminary approved by the judge does not mean that it is automatically going to come into effect. Assuming they pass all of these various check marks, it's being reported that the earliest the settlement would come into effect to impact college sports would be 25-26. Sam and I have spoken with some, we'll say officials at schools, and they are preparing for it to get accepted. But as I have advised them, as the great Lee Corso says, not so fast, my friend. Let's pump the brakes. These objectors are coming in heavy and fast. So, we're just giving you the update. So we'll have a big update by January 31st. But the hearing, which we'll keep close tabs on, is not for another 6 months. So plenty of time there. Sam, anything I did not mention on the House settlement?
I don't think so. I think you nailed it. Gave a good background yesterday at St. John's, and I think you touched on every important aspect of the case.
So Sam, would you say I'm 3 for 3? I'm just doing a great job on my
You're
podcast?
doing a great job. Great job.
The thing
and
is,
I'm not kissing up to you because I work for you.
Yeah, but in real life, you are not this nice to me. I expect a little more disagreement. So it's okay. Last but not least, on the college sports front. So I alluded to this. I'm not sure everyone caught this, but it's something my law students. Maybe you remember this. I've said this is one of my hot takes in my class. I've done this on the radio, and I said with the NCAA paying out $2.8 billion among a number of things, and the NCAA not punishing schools anymore, everything up, down, left, right, you name it. I'm not quite sure that the NCAA needs to exist anymore. I've said that. People think I'm crazy. And I said we have to envision a future where the NCAA just might not be needed anymore. And maybe that will partially explain why there seems to be an exodus from these conferences and a collection of powers, be it in the Big Ten or the SEC and the ACC. So we had an interesting story. Again, I kind of alluded to it, but an interesting story came up yesterday that there is this thing called it's called Project Rudy. I'm going to read from a Sports Illustrated article. A private equity firm led by former Disney executives has met with more than 25 Power Conference athletic directors to discuss this Project Rudy, a proposal for a college football super league. At the core of the proposal from private equity firm Smash Capital is a plan to incorporate the 4 power conferences and a 70-team structure that would expand the postseason, modify scheduling, tier revenue distribution, and infuse as much as $9 billion in private capital cash for the schools involved. Okay, so I have given this hot take for a long time. I've said I think the SEC and the Big Ten, if they wanted to do their own thing, they probably could, and I think that explains why the NCAA is hesitant to punish those schools in particular because of all the power they wield. So this proposal, at least according to Sports Illustrated's Ross Dellinger, seems to be, for all 4 Power 4 schools, Power 4 conferences, not including the refurbished Pac-12, whatever we want to call it. But yeah, I think I've said this for now since the dawn of the NIL era in 2021. I think it's a reality. I don't really see what the NCAA, I don't really see what it does. And there is such a divide now between the haves and the have-nots that I think physically separating them into a separate league, I'm fine with that. And then you create a level playing field. I have no issue with that. And Sam, your Maryland Terrapins would be involved in this, fortunately.
We would be involved, but I'm a little skeptical about all the traveling and how that would work with scheduling. Again, the Big Ten now is anywhere from Washington, Oregon to Maryland, Penn State, Rutgers. So there is a lot of traveling now, but it would be so interesting to see 70 teams in one major league. It's definitely interesting to see, but
I'll take your perspective on this. It's not your legal brain, but are you, as a longtime Big Ten guy, what did you like that they're bringing in all these West Coast schools? I'm curious what you think. I have my own thoughts.
It's twofold, I guess, because on the football side, we've never been really good, and we started to get a little bit better last year. We had baby Tua.
To his brother.
Baby Tua, and we started to get a little bit better, and all of that hype kind of went out the window with the addition of Oregon and USC, and I guess not really UCLA, but Washington was good last year. On the basketball side, I think it brings more competition. I think the Big Ten has struggled in March Madness to go far for a long time. And I think that the increased competition will be good for the Big Ten. But again, I'm a little worried about having to travel to the West Coast. Makes it a lot more difficult. So, you're not going to be seeing as many home games against those, rivals for a long time. For me, it's a little bit more difficult because Maryland is considered fake Big Ten because we were in the ACC for so long. But you
Why,
know,
why do you put it in quotes? Everyone says that.
no one says that. We're Big Ten now.
You
From
just said it.
from the time that I went there, we were Big Ten, so I consider us Big Ten. But it's going to be difficult to incorporate all the traveling and
Who are some
playing
good
those teams at home.
Maryland college football alums? Like any big pros?
A lot of we Stephon Diggs, DJ Moore,
Diggs went to Maryland?
yeah.
Oh, wow.
What's Nick Cross, who I believe leads the league in tackles on the Colts. Vernon Davis,
DJ Moore's. Oh, I knew Vernon Davis. I did know Vernon Davis.
um,
DJ Moore's a big one. I didn't know that.
Darnell Savage. I believe he was on the Packers. I'm not sure what
No,
team he's on
you
now.
got me at DJ Moore and Stephon Diggs. That's pretty legit. I was with a friend of mine that goes to Wisconsin. We were talking about they're like low key, like they have incredible running backs. Did you know that
Yeah,
Wisconsin like
Jonathan Taylor, now Braden
yeah,
Allen,
Ron Ron
Melvin
Dane
Gordon,
way back when. Uh,
Monty
yeah,
Ball.
Monty Ball, yeah, and you know your college sports. Um, but yeah, I guess we'll close the loop on this, and I bring this up to say that I've always found it like I thought that when the SEC took Texas and Oklahoma, one of two things could have happened. The Big Ten could have said, "Cool, congrats, you have Texas and Oklahoma. We're pretty good. We're still the Big Ten. We have huge television networks. We're going to split our revenue amongst ourselves, and we'll feel pretty good." Um, or they could match, the firepower that the SEC was bringing to try to remain the top conference, the best competition. So I lean towards them getting extra schools to keep pace. And then something interesting happened. Like, okay, these additional schools that are coming in, like, yes, USC, I totally get. Like UCLA, like, I don't know, like they're not the best football school. Like I get Oregon is, Washington, I think is a pretty good fan base, but they're not like necessarily known as a blue blood in the sport. And the question is, why do you need that many teams? Are you really competing with the SEC, or are you giving yourself outs to create a separate league? Like I don't think adding USC and UCLA and Washington and Oregon, like to the extent that you need to now share revenue with those four schools, I don't think your television contract goes up that much more. You don't do that unless there's a longer game, and I think this is the long game. I think creating these super conferences. You
Yeah, I
seem
mean,
to.
I'm pushing back on you a little bit. I think
There we go. We got
USC.
one. We got one.
I think in terms of football, I would say USC is definitely maybe not the top Alabama, Georgia, but even going back to the early 2000s with, now Reggie Bush is in the news, but Reggie Bush, Matt Leinart, those 2 years that they had, now they have Lincoln Riley, they had Caleb Williams. So I think they're a pretty prominent college football team, and I think they definitely bring in revenue. And, on the basketball side, they're getting all of these LA in the new influencer era. They're getting all of these LA guys. They got Bronny, they got um, you know, the other LA players, Juju, the women's player. So I think they definitely bring in revenue. I don't know what the end goal is, but I just think it's interesting. I think once those four teams left the Pac-12, it led to a trickle down effect where all these other Pac-12 teams realized that the Pac-12 was going to be no longer. And just to see how that, led to Arizona and all of those other teams going to the Big 12, I think it was just super interesting to see how quickly it happened. And now the Pac-12 is just trying to stay afloat. And now they're getting Gonzaga and Boise State and some of these other teams are
There,
officially going to the Pac-12, I
there,
think.
yeah, we talked about it in a recent episode. I think there's some value for the Pac-12 existing. There's that IP is worth so much they can't let it die. I commend, and some of the lawyers involved are friends of the show. I commend the efforts to keep the Pac-12 alive. But if you read this report, it's not a Power Five deal; it's a Power Four deal. So even though the Pac-12 like exists, they're not being considered as a Power Five, quote unquote, for this deal, which would have been the case 2 years ago. So, yeah, I mean, and maybe that's the other reason. You figured if you're not growing, you're dying, and expanding schools prevented this. So, ACC, there's been a lot of talk of schools trying to leave there, but at least for the time being, they're included. So, um, anyway, interesting. Sam, let's end with this question. question, and I did not prep you on this question. Are you ready for this?
I guess so.
Did you watch the Devin Haney Ryan Garcia fight?
I didn't. I'm not a huge boxing guy. I've gotten into UFC slowly,
Have
um,
you?
a little bit here and there. It's a little late for me. It's hard to keep up, with all the different sports teams that I'm a fan of, to add that into the repertoire. But I've been trying to watch a little bit of UFC as it's gained steam the last few years.
UFC is the best.
It's
I'm going
just
to tell you
so
something.
hard to stay up till what the
It's
main fight starts at what 1 a.m.
um yeah, but like as OG listeners of the show know, I'm nocturnal. I'm generally up at weird hours.
But you
Um,
also like WWE and all of that stuff.
I
So
do. It's very similar.
yeah,
Actually,
not at all though. One's
no,
real
no,
and one's
no.
fake.
Hold on, relax. Up until the bell rings, it's basically the same sport. There's promos, there's this, there's promo packages. Oh, so I gave listeners of the show a homework assignment. Um, you don't have to do this, but I would tell you the Vince McMahon documentary from a sports law perspective, sports business perspective. Um, it's it's from an entrepreneurial perspective. It hits every lane of sports. Um, but at one point, the big revelation that I didn't know about, I follow the product pretty closely. Shane McMahon, Vince's son, tried to get him to buy UFC for like $2 million way back when, and said like, we are in the business of show business, like everything up until the bell rings, like we know how to do. And Vince apparently pushed back on him and said, even though it was like $2 million was nothing, he goes, yeah, that might be true, but like we are in the business of making stars, and like the Undertaker, and if wins and losses like aren't predetermined, then your star could lose the next day and not be worth anything. And Vince isn't wrong, but from a business perspective, like UFC is worth like billions of dollars. So
Yeah.
I think UFC is probably worth more than WWE at this point. WWE was worth more for a long time.
I'm not entirely sure. That's not my area of expertise.
Well, you're lucky you work with someone whose area of expertise it is. Okay, where did we get down this rabbit hole? Devin Haney, Ryan Garcia. For those that don't know, Ryan Garcia, you know who Ryan Garcia is,
Of
fair?
course. Yeah.
Because he's insane.
Yes.
Yeah,
I enjoy him on Twitter, just much like Antonio Brown.
much.
It's entertaining.
They might have the same publicist. They might.
They might both have CTE, but
They
undisclosed.
might. They might have a podcast on CT ESPN as Antonio
That would
Brown
do
says.
pretty well.
I'm of the opinion that Antonio Brown hires someone for his tweets. He's so maybe I'm gonna get in trouble. He's very creative with his tweets. We'll just say
Yes,
in a way,
definitely.
and very timely that would be akin to what a social media manager would do. So I'm leaning towards him having one. But in any event, Devin Haney is involved in a boxing match against Ryan Garcia. Ryan Garcia is a very big underdog in that fight. Everyone thinks Haney's going to roll over him. Garcia is doing media interviews where he's saying these crazy conspiracy theories, and people think Ryan Garcia has legitimately lost his mind before this fight with Devin Haney. So Ryan Garcia, of basically people know him for being insane at this point. Once upon a time was a really good boxer. Gets into the fight with Devin Haney, wins, shocks everybody, shocks the world, and then a few days after, comes out that Ryan Garcia tested positive for some type of illegal substance, some type of performance-enhancing drug. Devin Haney, about a week ago at this point, sues Ryan Garcia. Ready for this, Sam? You ready for this?
Hmm.
Okay. Sues him for battery, fraud, and unjust enrichment relating to their April 20th fight. Okay. Sam, I alluded to this before. A boxer is suing a boxer for battery, fraud, and unjust enrichment. Sam, do you want to take the case that this lawsuit makes sense? Or this lawsuit should be thrown out of court, just from what I just told you. That's it.
I think there's two sides of it, but I would say that I would probably lean towards it should be thrown out. I think, you know, going back towards the assumption of risk factor, the amount of who's the UFC guy, John Jones, the
Maybe.
amount of the amount of steroids and uh, enhancing drugs in the sport. I think that there's a level of assumption of risk, even though they are being enhanced and they might be. I think the fraud element's a little bit more difficult, but in terms of the battery element, I think that, it's clear assumption of risk. You're getting in the ring and you're expecting that you're going to get hit in the face. So I think that that case doesn't carry much merit, in my opinion. In terms of the fraud element, I think I don't really know if there's ever been a case like that where they're alleging fraud, but it seems to
Oh,
me that it should be tossed.
so he took an and you're talking about John Jones, who I think it's contested whether he did it on purpose or not. But yes, there are certainly some allegations around John Jones' illegal substances. Um, what we should bring up is Brock Lesnar in a case that we're intimately familiar with. Jason Moore, and your friend and former contributor to Conduct. He still contributes occasionally on the Twitter. Um, but he had an article that picked up a lot of traction internationally because Mark Hunt of Australian fame retweeted it. But Brock Lesnar was once, now speaking of WWE, found to have taken steroids after, or some type of PEDs, after he beat Mark Hunt in a fight. So the question is, if someone's hitting harder and knocking you down to the ground, let's say, for Devin Haney's purposes, he had never lost before. He was 31-0, and Ryan Garcia was his first time he was ever knocked around a ring like that. So he's saying, I was never hit that hard. I fought 31 guys before. He's been in title fights. He's fought all guys of just as good of caliber as Ryan Garcia. How was he the only one to knock me out? And as far as we know, he's the only one that was found to have been taking some type of PED. So I get it from Haney's perspective. Mark Hunt and Brock Lesnar was a little more difficult because Lesnar, Mark Hunt didn't have a flawless record before that. So you could say, to your point, Sam, like, you've been knocked down before, you've been beat up. So, you're assuming that you assume that you're going to get hit in the face to some extent. But Haney's making the argument, I literally have never lost before. And I'm the one that's allowed to allege that you must be cheating to beat me because it's never happened before. So it's a little more plausible from Haney's perspective. I think from Haney, right, and this bout was changed. It was supposed to be his first loss. He was supposed to go to 31-1, but because this win got overturned and later ruled a no contest, Haney now goes to 31-0 and a no contest. So this loss, though, does hurt Haney in a way that it wouldn't hurt a boxer or a fighter that's been defeated in some way before. His flawless and pristine record is thrown out the door, and he looks now beatable. So that could be the difference of several multiples of millions of dollars because of Ryan Garcia. So I totally get the damages element, but to you, I think, Garcia's going to have a lot of defenses here on the assumption of the risk element.
Yeah, I agree. I think that, if he's claiming reputational damage, I understand that point. If he's claiming fraud and, emotional distress, I think it's going to be, there's going to be a lot of defenses that can be raised. So in my little knowledge of the case, I would think it would get tossed.
Interesting fact, Garcia and Haney had like a side bet that Garcia wouldn't make weight. So Garcia paid Haney $600,000 after he weighed 3 pounds over the limit for their fight. As a result of this, steroids or PED finding, Ryan Garcia paid a $1.1 million fine and accepted a 1-year suspension. So just on those two things alone, $1.1 million fine to the New York State Athletic Commission plus $600,000 to Haney. That's already $1.7 million that Garcia has paid relating to this fight. And he's suspended from a year, and I don't think any other commission is going to allow him to take a fight because New York's a pretty major commission. On top of that, his kind of lost opportunities to fight, Garcia is now being sued. So yeah, this is millions and millions in exposure to Garcia. So we'll keep a close eye on it. Ryan Garcia he's got our attention on this. I do think there will be, as perverse as this sounds, I do think there will be a Ryan Garcia-Devin Haney rematch at some point, and I think you and I will tune in to watch it, even if it's at 1
We'll definitely watch that one
in the morning. Okay. I think we are about ready to wrap this up. Sam, we do a segment at the end of every show called What to Watch For. Since we are short on time, you're going to be watching the Yankees, and I am
and the Islanders tomorrow.
And the Islanders. I do have a prop bet if people want to follow and they just want to bet along and have me occasionally reference on the show. I bet the Islanders at plus 100, even money, to make the playoffs. Sam,
I
you and
love
I are
it.
going to go to a couple of Islanders game. We have box seats to most games. Do we
Yeah,
like the Islanders to make the playoffs?
I do. I mean, I'm a little biased, as Jason Morin knows. He's a Rangers fan. I think the Islanders will get it done this year. I think the Rangers, on the other hand, they haven't gotten it done the last few years.
Whoa.
So I think that,
You don't think the Rangers are going to make the playoffs? That's the
no,
prediction?
I think they'll make the playoffs. But again,
Nope. That's not what I heard.
when
That's
you're
not
of
what I heard.
that caliber, it's not making the playoffs. It's winning it all, and they've
Okay.
had a lot of opportunities and haven't done it. So
So
we'll
for
see what
me,
happens.
my
I will be
prediction is
there tomorrow, though.
Islanders to make the playoffs. Sam's prediction is Rangers to miss the playoffs. You heard it here first. You get those odds at like plus 300. Sam, you staking your reputation on it?
Yeah, I don't hate the bet. I think I don't know what the exact odds are, but I don't hate it. I think
Okay.
the Metro is tough this year, but go Yankees.
We'll see if Jason listens to this podcast and calls you to yell at you. Okay, that'll do it for us here at Conduct Detrimental. Sam, appreciate you joining on short notice. And yeah, that will do it for us. And shout out to Mike Kravchenko and to the New York Yankees. Shout out to the Yankees. Let's root for
Let's
a win
get it
tonight.
done tonight.
That'll do it for us here in Conduct Detrimental. And we will see you next time on another episode of the Sports Law Podcast, Conduct Detrimental.